In this video, I will be discussing Gheorghe Ligeti as an advocate avant-garde and his legacy based on his development and use of a form of polyphonic musical texture known as micropolyphony. I will touch on the overall idea of micropolyphony. Specifically, I will analyze its mensural notation and how this notation correlates to the sound that is produced. Gheorghe Ligeti was a famous eclectic of the 20th century, meaning he derived his musical ideas and styles from a variety of different sources. As we look back on Ligeti's life, there are certain milestones and experiences that helped spread and shape his musical spectrum. Throughout his life, Ligeti had personal experiences which we can correlate to having a certain effect on his musical styles. For example, in the year 1950, when World War II ended, Ligeti was released from a forced labor brigade and returned to Hungary. He returned to his studies in ethnomusicological research in Hungarian folk music, which helped him reconnect with his culture. After the Hungarian Revolution ended in 1956, Ligeti fled with his ex-wife to Cologne, where he was able to experiment with electronic music. He became fascinated by these new electronic sounds, to which he incorporated the textures of electronic sounds into his musical works, not the technology itself. This exposure to new textures allowed him to discover new contemporary styles and methods. Ligeti visited Africa between the years of 1980 and 1990. The indigenous music of the sub-Saharan African tribes stemmed his rhythmic complexity, to which he incorporated into his later and most famous works, a few which will be discussed later in this video. Micropolyphony is a type of polyphonic musical texture which consists of many lines of condensed canons moving at different tempos or rhythms, thus resulting in vertical tone clusters. If you look at the picture on the top right of the screen, you can see a visual representation of this idea. Even though this picture does not represent the rhythmic aspect of micropolyphony, it helps visualize the idea of overlapping canons which create tone clusters. An important characteristic of micropolyphony is that the importance of individual pitches is greatly minimized. There is now a preference for texture, timbre, and dynamics as the primary shapers of gesture and impact, which defied conventional melody, pitch, and rhythm. The picture on the lower left clearly portrays this idea. Micropolyphony is considered more as a web of sound that does not solely depend on one melody supported by chords. Rather, all the voices equally contribute to the overall sound. I will now compare and contrast two famous pieces that were composed around the same time. On the left is Karl Amadeus Hartmann's Symphony No. 6, which was composed between the years 1951 and 1953. On the right is Gheorghe Ligeti's Lux Aeterna, which was composed in the year 1966. If you look within the red brackets of Hartmann's piece, it's evident that there is a melody, countermelody, and support for both of these voices. This structure, combined with dynamics, gives the piece a specific sound structure. This is a sound clip of Hartmann's Symphony No. 6. Now we will look at the beginning of Gheorghe Ligeti's Lux Aeterna. After analyzing the script within the red brackets, it's difficult to see which voice carries a melody, if at all. It's obvious to note the polyphony. However, what makes micropolyphony is the voices moving in at different times, resulting in vertical tone clusters. I will play a clip from the introduction of Ligeti's Lux Aeterna. When listening to this piece, think of adjectives that describe the way the sound appeals to your emotions. After listening to this clip of Lux Aeterna, there is no doubt that it influenced your emotions in some way. Some adjectives you may have thought about were ominous, mysterious, anxious, alien-like, dark, mischievous, and many other adjectives. This effect is what made this piece well known. What's interesting is that Ligeti composed Lux Aeterna with the sole purpose of composing a symphonic or simply a musical piece. However, Lux Aeterna became a popular piece because of its use in the film industry. Stanley Kubrick was an American film director, screenwriter, producer, cinematographer, editor, and photographer. He was in the process of producing a film known as 2001: A Space Odyssey. He was in the midst of choosing pieces to be in his film when he came across compositions from Ligeti. Ligeti's music was at the forefront of Kubrick's mind. He enjoyed the fact that Ligeti tended to follow his own path in the music production, which sounded unique and defied classification. It was this mentality that allowed Ligeti to compose abstract and eerie compositions, which was a sound that Kubrick was looking for. It's fascinating to think that a previously composed piece was included into a film that was currently being produced. It's because of the mood and timbre that Lux Aeterna portrayed that made it popular. Thinking back on the previous adjectives that were mentioned, it's not difficult to grasp the idea of why this piece was used in this film. Within the film itself, the piece is played during a part of the film that portrayed an ominous and mysterious section. This piece helped the magnitude the film was trying to portray. It allowed the listener to become anxious themselves, to prepare them for a turn of events. This shows how a particular piece of music can influence the listener into feeling a particular way or to prepare to feel a certain way. This concludes the analysis of Gheorghe Ligeti and his development of micropolyphony, as well as its effect on the listener's mood based on its written notation. It is this ability to shift a person's state of mind that made Ligeti popular in the film industry, even though Ligeti did not write with the purpose of film in mind. This shows the obvious fact that music can be used to push a person's mood into feeling a particular way. My name is Christian Sandoval, and thank you for listening to my analysis on Gheorghe Ligeti.